Good. Welcome everybody. We are very excited here for our next guest who is live in the studio. Welcome Jos. Jos is one of the founders of Nextcloud, and that's by coincidence also the subject of his presentation. So let's head over to Jos.
Yeah, what a surprise. I'll indeed be talking about Nextcloud. So I created a little bit of an agenda. First, the question is that I'm going to discuss why Nextcloud is interesting. Second, what I can do. And third, how does it work? So the famous what, why, and how will all be covered. Now, starting with the why. So the fundamental question that we started Nextcloud with and before is how can we communicate and work with others privately over the internet, as well as how much should we depend on centralized tech platforms. The reality at the moment is that a couple of big tech companies of course run more or less the world, and they are having an incredible impact on everybody's life today. And this is of course only accelerating with AI. AI needs a ton of data, it needs a huge amount of capital, and so this makes the dominance of a relatively small number of big tech companies even more. So about 15 years ago in San Diego, a good friend of mine, Frank Karliczek, started a project as a volunteer, hobby project. He felt that there was a problem with all the data going into the cloud at the time. Him, as well as myself and many other people, were part of an open source movement that was building desktops, Linux desktops. And we thought, well, if you have your laptop and you control the software on your laptop, you are free from big tech. But unfortunately, the reality these days is that if the data that you work with on your laptop is shared with other people, you'll probably be putting it in the cloud. And back then that was, for example, Dropbox. And that means you lose that control. And this was the problem that Frank wanted to fix. Now, of course, nothing has really changed in this regard. It has only been bigger. Yes, collaboration software makes our lives easier, and that is definitely incredible and helpful. But the cost is our privacy and the control over our computing. So how can we benefit without sacrificing our privacy, our independence, and our sovereignty? Yeah, that's the question. I mean, at the moment, all our data is at these big companies. It is essentially available for the organizations on the right side to do with as they will. And what we need is a solution that is open source, that puts you in control. It gives you digital sovereignty. Yeah. You should be able to run it where you want. You should be able to pick a location, a server that you want. You should still be able, of course, to work with other people, so it needs to be decentralized. It needs to be scalable, and it needs to be, well, again, under your control, for which open source, I think, is a key point. So this is where Nextcloud comes in. So I'm going to show you quickly, after talking about the why, I'm going to show you quickly what we have built. So Nextcloud is effectively a private cloud collaboration platform. So it's a platform in the sense that there's a bunch of applications available, and each of these has end-user functions, like, for example, sharing files, editing documents, doing video calls and chat, sending mails, handling your calendar, and so on. Yeah, and you can run this on your server wherever you want. So it's just a piece of software. All we do is make software and perhaps help you run it. We don't host. There's no cloud. In a way, it's the anti-cloud. Now, what does it look like? Well, you have a nice dashboard where you can get started. Set the user status. You have the files view where you can see all your documents, maybe put some notes on top, share it with other people. Of course, if you prefer to see pictures, you can do that as well. You have Nextcloud Talk, which allows you to chat, have video calls with other people, maybe even in big groups, with webinars and such. We have Nextcloud Mail, where you can send your emails, read your emails, collaborate with other people there. Nextcloud Calendar, let you manage your calendar, of course, and invite other people. Really cool contacts app, where you can put all your contact details, track them. We have Nextcloud Deck, which lets you manage projects in a simple way. We have Nextcloud Collectives, which lets you manage kind of like a wiki, it's a knowledge management app. Nextcloud Forms, which lets you create and share forms with other people. Dashboard, whiteboard, tons of other applications. And all this on your phone, on your desktop, on your watch, wherever you want. Now, you might think, wow, okay, so I can do all of that with Nextcloud. That's a ton. That's really overwhelming. What really do you do? Why do you do everything? That's a question we get sometimes. So let's think for a minute. We want to help you be independent from the big tech platforms. And if you look a little bit through history to the market development, you see that in the early 2000s, WhatsApp and Slack and Zoom and Dropbox, they started to replace older technologies like IRC, ICQ, Windows Network Drive. Google Docs replaced, for example, Microsoft Office on the desktop, and so on. Now, of course, the open source community started to build alternatives. They started to build, tools that put you in control. You have Jitsi, you have Matrix, Big Blue Button, Collabora Online. And, these tools, they could replace these different applications as well. But over time, and that became especially visible with the pandemic, all these separate tools individually became a bit too limited, because again, the pandemic made this very clear. If you really need to work remote completely, having a hodgepodge of separate applications doesn't really work. If you occasionally do a webinar or a video call with a partner, you can use Zoom. If you occasionally need to share a document, Dropbox or OneDrive is fine. But if you're working all the time in these applications, then having to copy over a file from Dropbox into your Slack room, and then looking for what the latest version is in that file, because then you also emailed it to a third person, and now it's the email version that's the latest, or maybe it's still in your Windows Network Drive. This becomes a mess. So what you need is an integrated solution. And this is, of course, what Microsoft introduced with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams really integrated this file sharing, the video, the chat, and the Office document into a single platform. So now the question is, okay, we have all these separate open source apps, but that's no longer the future. The future is an integrated collaboration platform. And this is, of course, where Nextcloud comes in, and especially versus Teams. The platform that we developed, Nextcloud Talk, that is the alternative to Microsoft Teams here. This integrated, doing everything together platform that you really need. So I keep talking about platform. As I said, Nextcloud is an app platform. That means there are different apps, different components that work closely together and help you be productive. So you have the calendar app, but you can, in the Nextcloud Mail, you can create a calendar appointment. You have Nextcloud Talk for video calls, but when you create a calendar appointment, you can add a talk room to that appointment so that people get invited. And the people you invite get added to the talk room, and the description from the calendar item gets put in there as well. And then, of course, you can attach files to the appointment and into the talk room. So all these components come together. And this integration goes beyond the Nextcloud apps themselves. So if you say, hey, that's great, but instead of Nextcloud Talk, I want to use Jitsi, you can. There's integration also with Jitsi. If you say, hey, I have other components I want to use for project management, I don't want to use Nextcloud Deck, I want to use, Open Project, again, there's integration, you can do this as well. So it's very modular, but a lot of these apps are built to really integrate in a nice way. Now, when I give a nice example, which is in our Nextcloud Talk app, where you can see that you have a bunch of content you can insert, and you have a super easy way to create a calendar appointment right there from Nextcloud Talk, and all the participants in the room, they will get a nice invitation. You know, there's an item in the calendar, they will get an email. And so, as I said, it acts as a single platform this way. And of course, all of this is built open source with our community. Yeah? Nextcloud has a huge community. There are thousands of people contributing to Nextcloud all over the world. And so this project has become really successful. Yeah? We have tens of millions of users. Nextcloud is not something that is only used by a few people at home on their laptop or on their Raspberry Pi, but Nextcloud is used by big companies, big organizations that use Nextcloud sometimes for hundreds of thousands or even millions of users. So it has become a really big and impactful project, even a movement, I would say. So, very shortly, I cannot do sound, can I?
We believe privacy is a fundamental human right, and everybody should have access to secure communication free from surveillance.
Now let me go back a little bit. I wanted to show a little video of the values that we at Nextcloud have built our company and our community on. So, yeah, listen to this for a minute.
We believe privacy is a fundamental human right, and everybody should have access to secure communication free from surveillance.
We are building decentralized products as an alternative to centralized platforms. People can choose what they want and where they want it.
We believe in open source and open standards. Open source is the only way for users to trust their devices.
We value sustainability, protecting people, society, and the environment.
We believe accessibility is a fundamental human right and technology should be accessible to everyone.
The time of our users is very important to us. That's why we do our best to make Nextcloud easy to use.
We foster diversity, from innovation to transparency and collaboration. Working with our community and supporting marginalized people leads to a better result.
So, those are the values that we've built Nextcloud on. Nextcloud is a community, it's a product, but it's of course also a business, which is doing well. The numbers are already a little bit outdated. We're now about 130 people. And we're self-funded, so no venture capital. It's owned by the people who work at Nextcloud, which keeps us independent and makes sure, well, that it stays that way. Yeah. Now, all our products are open source on premises, so we just make software completely open source that you can run yourself, that you can edit, improve, work on, and of course extend with new functionality and features. Thousands of customers, tens of thousands of customers even, all over the world, big companies, small companies. Yeah, and of course there are about 500,000 Nextcloud servers on the internet. So of course most of the Nextcloud servers are run by people at home, private users, maybe small charities, schools, you know, local soccer club maybe, you know, tons of small organizations running their own Nextcloud. So that gives you a bit of an idea of this Nextcloud. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the what. What does Nextcloud look like? How does it work? And how can you run it? What can you do with it? Yeah, these are the things I want to talk about next. So Nextcloud can work on very small devices. You can run on a Raspberry Pi or maybe an old laptop at home. I know in the Netherlands there is a journalist who runs it on his old Android phone that he keeps next to his bed and automatically uploads his photos to from his other phone. This way, keeping his photos to himself. And I think that's a really cool use case. There are of course many other things you can do with Nextcloud. You can use it indeed to upload your private photos. You can use it to share calendars with your family, store your documents and work on them of course together. You can do your homework with it, but also there are apps for password management, to do video calls, store your bookmarks, search through your recipes, and there are 1,000 other things. Yeah, hundreds of apps exist in Nextcloud, and I think it's really, if you want to play around with a home lab, you know, run your own servers and networking and experiment with it, Nextcloud is really cool. It can really run there, do lots of things for you. You can connect other tools to it, you know, use the notifications, for example, and connect it to another app. Use the API to send notifications to yourself on your phone, etc. There's a ton of really cool things you can do with it. Of course, Nextcloud is also used in a much bigger setup, a huge Kubernetes setup with millions of users, for example, like here in Germany, the Deutsche Telekom, the German telecom company, they are running Magenta Cloud, which has several millions of users, and this is a Nextcloud-based technology. And even bigger, in Central and South America, Claro Drive has tens of millions of users, and yeah, they're distributing in several hosting centers, and again offering, you know, Nextcloud to a lot of people there. So in a business, Nextcloud can be used for very specific use cases. You know, you can say, hey, you know, in our big company, we have a board that oversees the company. We don't want to put the board on the same IT infrastructure as the rest of the company, so we create a special Nextcloud environment where the board can work separate from the rest of the company. Or maybe you say, hey, we have an HR department, you know, it's handling sensitive data, you know, resumes from people, or like complicated, you know, conflicts in the company, and we want that to be used with Nextcloud so that the data is not mixed with other data in the company. Yeah. We can also have more generic use cases. We have, for example, a lot of universities that use Nextcloud. Sometimes they use it to let the students work together. So the students, you know, can exchange documents and collaborate on them. They can ask questions, you know, from the teachers in chat, etc. You have tons of interesting things you can do with Nextcloud because you can run it yourself. For example, the German radio and television, ARD ZDF, they actually run 2 Nextcloud servers. So they have one Nextcloud server which is external, connected to the internet, and so when a journalist is in a country which perhaps is a bit less friendly to free press, where there is surveillance, they can interview people, you know, maybe put the interview on their phone, and when they're at the hotel, their phone will automatically upload the interview to the Nextcloud server from the radio and television, and then it is on the public Nextcloud server. Then there is a team of people who will check these files, you know, scan for viruses, scan for maybe attempts to break in, and then when the files are saved, they will move them to a second Nextcloud server, which is disconnected from the internet and only available internally. And there, the media teams and journalists can work to create a story, create a video, that then in the end goes on the television or the radio. So this way, they keep a wall, a literal firewall, between the outside world, where the data might be attacked, and the inside world. Or for example, there are armies that use Nextcloud, several of them in the world. And of course, they want to make sure that when there is a conflict, and maybe undersea cables get cut, or, you know, networking is disrupted, they can still keep working, even when there is no internet. And so again, this is where Nextcloud can help. Or imagine if you're in a rural area, in an area with just bad internet, or even sometimes no internet for days or weeks, you would be able to run a local Nextcloud service. So people in a village or a city can still chat, share documents, and work together, even if there is no internet available, because they can still work on the local Nextcloud server. And so there are many use cases where you can use Nextcloud, and of course in the end you can also simply replace Google or Microsoft completely with Nextcloud. It can do all the work. You can add the documents and share them, work with other people. There's a ton of stuff you can do. I mean, Nextcloud is a pretty good replacement for a tool like Slack, for example, and it is used like this at a lot of companies. You can do your team calls on it. You can just right there on Nextcloud, you can edit documents. share tasks, work with other people. And so, of course, in a business environment, this is incredibly helpful because not only is it easy to use and really nicely integrated, but the data never leaves the servers of the company, which is obviously really important. Now, as a company, you might want to do webinars. You might want to, invite people, via email, import a spreadsheet with people, and then, do a presentation to a few hundred potential customers, for example, or for a training at a university. You do screen share, chat, microphone, all these abilities. Ton of things you can do to basically let people collaborate in such an environment. You can, do polls, basically perfect for webinars and such. And if you're an administrator, you will find that Nextcloud is pretty easy to maintain. We work really hard on making it easy, but it's also very extensible. So you can install out of about 400 apps on our App Store. You can add tons of new functionality and features, and you can even automate pretty complicated processes in your company by setting up automated actions between your apps in Nextcloud Hub as well as external apps. So you can, for example, monitor a folder or even a Nextcloud Forms app for form submissions. And then when somebody fills in the form or uploads a file, you can send a notification. You can then put maybe the information from a PDF. You can extract the data. You can put it in the Nextcloud Tables app in a table. You can then request maybe an approval. You can automatically send payment links. And all these abilities are available in Nextcloud to automate processes. Again, at home, maybe you have a home automation system. You could connect this to Nextcloud and control it from your Nextcloud apps. Now, of course, all of this gets even cooler with AI. So a couple of years ago, we introduced the Nextcloud Assistant, and that's a self-hosted, open source AI assistant. It's based on large language models, the self-hosted models, the open source models, and can be completely run on-prem without sending data to third parties. Now, of course, AI has its pros and cons. So, for a minute, I want to talk about weasels. Those little weird animals. Some people keep them as pets. Now, in our company, there's a team that works on AI, and the team lead for this team, Daphne is her name. She is also involved in technology ethics research, and so she's pretty skeptical of the big tech approach to business when it comes to privacy and also AI. Now, of course, there are tons of problems with AI the way it is used by big tech. You lose control over your data. They are training on data that is just scraped from the internet. That is not very ethical. But there are also problems with AI in the sense that at the moment we're trying to use AI for everything. And maybe that's not always a good idea. So Daphne introduced a rule. If you want to propose something to be done by AI, when you explain it to the team, you have to replace the term AI with trained weasel. And when talking about the trained weasels, you always have to keep in mind that the weasels are racist and sexist. So the question is, should a trained weasel do something? And it's a racist and sexist weasel. So, should a trained weasel be used to create an image for your playlist and YouTube music? I think that's fine. Should a trained weasel drive a few tons of steel over a highway? I personally find that a rather scary idea, and I don't think it's a good idea. Should a trained weasel decide who gets hired or who gets fired in the company? Well, the weasels are racist and sexist. I really don't think this is a good idea. So that's the basic idea, the approach at which we approach AI at Nextcloud. AI has incredible opportunities. It can make things easier, but we really need to be transparent about the downsides. So we created an ethical AI rating at Nextcloud. to help you decide as a user what AI features are right for you. So we have a bunch of AI integrations in Nextcloud, and we try to give each of these integrations a score: red, orange, yellow or green. And this score is based on 3 factors that address key concerns with AI. First, is the AI solution open source? That would mean you can adapt the training, maybe fix bias or optimize the energy use. Second, is the model freely available? That allows you to run it wherever you want, including in your own data center, so that your data does not leak. And third, is the training data freely available? Because if the training data is available and the code is open source, you can look in the training data, you can look for problems, and you can also retrain the model, maybe to be more efficient, for example. Now, of course, that's not perfect. As I said, the weasels are racist and sexist and biased in every other way. And the 3 factors that I mentioned, they cannot cover that. Because there is at the moment no way to, for example, give a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 how biased an AI model is. This is just not really possible at the moment. So our rating does not include that. It does say the data should be open, so you could check perhaps for bias. And maybe the model is not good for people with a certain skin color. Maybe the model cannot recognize women as well as it can recognize men. These kind of issues you can then look for. But at the moment there's no objective rating for this, so we do not take that into account. Similar energy use, if you have 2 models that do the exact same thing, you could compare energy use. But 2 models that do the exact same thing in the same way, with the same performance, that doesn't really exist at the moment. So this is not really measurable. And of course the AI models make a lot of mistakes, hallucinations. A lot of models are trained on copyrighted data, stolen data even. These are all things that at the moment don't have an objective measure. So when you pick a Nextcloud model and it is green, you still have to keep in mind there are other factors that we cannot measure. Now, of course, a rating of red to green doesn't really help if you don't have a choice. So we built into Nextcloud a system where you can always choose which model you want to use for what. So for features like translation, text processing or dictating and text to speech or speech to text, you have multiple options with on-premises options and remotely running options. In this way we make it possible that you can also say, hey, we want to use a remote AI service just for summaries like ChatGPT, but I don't want to use it for maybe some other function. So this way you can choose yourself. Now, where did we put AI in Nextcloud? We put it in a lot of places already. But as I said, all optional. It's off by default, most of these features. And you have to pick if you want to turn them on and then how you want to use them with an on-premises model or not. So for example, we have text and image generation. We have face and object recognition, smart inbox in mail, call transcripts, and many other features that are built in. So I want to show just a couple of examples where the Nextcloud Assistant, our AI, is integrated in the products, and then I'm going to show you the assistant itself as a separate thing as well. So for example, in Nextcloud Mail, we have the AI integrated to summarize email threads. It also creates a smart inbox. It can suggest answers to emails. It will check if an email might need a follow-up from you. So it automatically makes a list of mails on top of your inbox that it says, oh, you need to follow up to these. There was a question for you, or people asked you for an opinion, for example. I think there are, translation is another feature that we've built in, so you can translate emails as well. So just a couple of integrations in Nextcloud Mail. In Nextcloud Talk, we have integration where if you have a video call, after the call, you can get a transcript of the call and a summary, so that you can then with full text search find, of course, the subject that were discussed, and in the summary, if you come back from vacation, you need to catch up to a company meetings, for example, you can just read the summaries very quickly. Another thing with summaries that we've done, if you come back from vacation, you often have like, I don't know, 2,000 unread emails, right, in your chat, 1,000 unread messages. And so the Nextcloud Assistant can summarize all these unread chat messages for you. Super nice, that helps you catch up much faster. And so, as I said, with all this on premises, you can run these AI models completely yourself, or you can find maybe AI as a service. There are several companies that offer hosted large language models and hosted image generation options, maybe in your country, that you can trust. And that way, as a business, you can be compliant with privacy rules. And as an individual, you don't need to worry that your data is used for training, other AI models. So, a couple of cool features I want to still mention. One is context chat, so you can ask questions about your own documents and data. For example, you can say, hey, in our company we have a vacation request process, how does this work? And you can just ask, and then the assistant can explain to you how this works. But it can also get data from other apps. So for example, we have an analytics app where you can store data and visualize it. And maybe you are storing that data from your solar panels. And then you can ask the assistant like, hey, what was the month with the highest solar energy production last year? And then the Nextcloud Assistant, because it has access to this data, can answer the question and tell you, hey, February or March was the highest. And can even go further. It's possible that you can ask the assistant to do things for you. So you can say, hey, dear assistant, I would like to you to send a chat message in a chat room, or maybe to create a document, or summarize the information about our travel policy and then put it in a PDF and send it by an email to a friend. And then the AI can grab the data, it can make the summary, create the document, create an email for you, find in the address book the email address of the person you want to mail, create the email, and at the end you just say confirm, and it will send the email for you. Or of course, if you say, well, the name was Peter, not Peter, you can then say, hey, please change the name, or maybe, the information should be in a PDF, etc. Yeah, or you say, hey, look at my email. I got a lot of emails last week with feature requests for our new product. Please put it in a spreadsheet and share that spreadsheet into the product development chat. And the Nextcloud Assistant can do that then for you with a nice chat message as well. So this is all quite easy to use. You can ask, well, what are chat messages? I have a little video here that shows you in action that you can, ask for the chat messages in a chat room. You can then say, hey, look up the weather in Berlin, and then the Nextcloud Assistant will look on the weather.com site, grab the weather report from Berlin, and you can say, okay, post it in the chat room, or ask one of the colleagues if they want to come to Berlin. You can ask the assistant, hey, can you look at the location of that colleague, what the weather is there? And then the AI can look in the address book, where does the colleague live? Stockholm, let's see what the weather is in Stockholm. It's colder than Berlin, why don't you come visit us in Berlin? Like, these kind of things are all possible. So yeah, that's a huge overview of everything that Nextcloud can do. I know it's really a ton. Yeah, let's talk about the how. Yeah, how can you run this? How can you get involved? How can you build Nextcloud apps perhaps? There's a ton there as well. So now, basic architecture of Nextcloud is in a way simple. It is a LAMP application. So LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. And it is the oldest and the most used Linux application development stack. That means a lot of people know how to do it. You can find a huge amount of information on the internet, and it is all very reliable and incredibly scalable. That's why it works on a Raspberry Pi, or spread over 5 data centers for 20 million users. There's a lot of flexibility there. Nextcloud can use multiple web servers, you can use different databases. Of course, they all have their pros and cons. If you use SQLite, you have no configuration to do. It's for testing locally, very helpful, but it also does not scale very well. If you are working with multiple people on your Nextcloud, you probably want to use MySQL or Postgres. There are a large number of optional components. You can get much better performance if you use the high performance backend, but those are written in Rust and Go, so that is a little bit harder, of course, to run. Our Office component, Nextcloud Office, it's built on Collabora Online, which in turn is based on LibreOffice. This is built in C++, so again, that is something different. You want to use Redis to improve the performance of the server. Now, if you say, okay, that's a server, that's kind of the technologies the server is built on. What is the technologies that you build the user interface in? What's the technology for the mobile apps, etc.? Well, that's Vue.js for the web interface. Our desktop app for files is built in C++ and Qt. And for Talk, it's an Electron web app. So there's a desktop app for Talk that you can use. Our Android and iOS apps are mostly built in Swift for iOS and Kotlin for Android. So those are pretty common, widely used languages there. So I think it is hopefully relatively easy to get involved in these projects, because of course all of this is on GitHub. It's all open source. So if you're an Android developer or want to be an Android developer, you can get involved in the Nextcloud Android apps. There are apps for Nextcloud Files, Nextcloud Talk, Nextcloud Notes, and there are a couple of community maintained apps, including Nextcloud Deck. So there's a ton of apps for the Nextcloud platform that you can use. I wanted to put in a picture to make it a little bit visible of how this all fits together. So you run a Linux server, and on the server you have Nextcloud with the configuration and the user management. You can do this external. You can use LDAP, you can use other user directories, you can use, single factor authentication mechanisms, for example. But basically, you can run on your own server. Now you would use Redis maybe for the performance, you have the database, you have the storage. Now you can use external storage. So you can say, hey, I have a Dropbox or a Google Drive, and you can connect these to Nextcloud and then put your files through Nextcloud on these external storages. You can then even use encryption so that the files get encrypted before they are sent to Google, so they cannot use your data for, anything else they want to use. And then, once you have your Nextcloud server up and running with Nextcloud, you can then connect via the web interface, or via the clients, the mobile apps, Android, iOS, or via the desktop apps to your Nextcloud, or even use a web dev interface from your desktop to access the files on Nextcloud and the web interface. Your emails, your documents, your calendars, etc. Of course, if you're a business, you use a slightly bigger architecture. You will have a load balancer, you will have multiple application servers, you will have multiple database servers. You might use object storage, for example, and so on. Completely different, game that you're playing. Kubernetes set up perhaps with, ton of other components. So that's a little bit on the architecture, how to run it. I want to talk a little bit for those of you who want to develop for Nextcloud. Maybe you would want to build an app. Maybe you want to work on the core of Nextcloud. Or maybe you have built your own application and you want to store your files from your application into Nextcloud. Or you've built a mobile app that wants to, store maybe a save game into Nextcloud. Or you want to access the chat in Nextcloud so that if you, for example, in your home automation, if the lights go on, you want to be able to send a message in the chat room that the lights are on. The other way around, you want to be able to say in the chat room, hey, home automation, turn on the lights. And that should then do a call out to your home automation system. And these things are all possible. And we have an API for this, open standards-based API, very powerful API that lets you talk to Nextcloud. Yeah, this is fully documented using open APIs, so there's very nice documentation available. We have SDKs for Python, Rust, and other languages, and we try and maintain this in the long term. We made an app for Nextcloud that makes it very easy to experiment with this API. It's called the OCS Viewer app. You can browse the API, for example, how do I log in? How do I send files? How do we receive, how do we create a share for a file and then get the link to the share and send it to somebody? Yeah, you can try these things out. You can test the request with some parameters. And you can then see the result, and then you can get the code. So you can just say, hey, I want to do this request, for example, create a share on a file. I want to create a request for that, and I want to do that in, say, Python. And then you just pick here in the API the right call you want to do, and then you pick the language you want the code from, and then you get the code, and you also get to try it out right there. So it's super easy, and it should really help you explore the different ways you can communicate with a Nextcloud server. As I already mentioned, we also offer a number of software development kits in Python, Rust, TypeScript, and Go. But of course, many other languages are supported. Now, as I mentioned, Nextcloud is built in PHP, and that's a language in which you could build a Nextcloud app. For example, you can build a password manager. There are already 2, but maybe you think you can do better and you build a 3rd. Or maybe you want to build a little game, or maybe you want to build an app to plan an event. These apps you can build on the Nextcloud framework, and that means you don't need to think about user authentication and access rights. You don't need to think about file management, because you can do that in Nextcloud. You don't need to think about database, because that's easily abstracted. So Nextcloud makes it very easy to build such apps. You can do it in PHP, but you don't have to. So Nextcloud also allows you to build apps in other languages. Yeah, I don't think a lot of you probably want to build apps in Haskell or Julia, but you can. Perhaps Python, Ruby, JavaScript are a bit more likely candidates for this, but it's possible to write apps in other languages. Now these apps, we call them X apps. They use microservice architecture, so they run separate from Nextcloud itself in a Docker container, and they talk via the OCS API, which of course helps with security and also with scalability. So, how do you now get started? Now, if you want to try out Nextcloud and just run it at home on your Raspberry Pi or on your server, or maybe on a little server space that you rent on the internet, you start by going to nextcloud.com/install. Now, you can download a zip file with Nextcloud and run that on your own LAMP Linux server. That gives you, of course, a lot of control and a lot of ability to fiddle with it. It is also more work to maintain, and you then need to set up all the other pieces like Redis and the database and Collaborate Online and lots of other pieces to have all the functionality that Nextcloud has. So it's an option, but what I would recommend is to use our all-in-one Docker container. You download the Docker container, you fire it up. The Docker container will then download all the other components that you need. So it will download the Docker container for Collaborate, it will download the Docker container for Nextcloud Talk for the video calls. It'll even have built-in, backups, and it makes it super easy basically to even use the AI features, for example. And then you have your own Nextcloud up and running, and suddenly you can share files, ask questions about them, invite other people to a video call on your own server, and so on. And of course, then you dive into our app store and you look for all these cool apps that you can, use and integrate deeper into Nextcloud. There are tons of apps available. If you're building apps for Nextcloud, we have built in some buttons that you can ask for donations for people to support your app development work. And of course, if you're a business, we even have built in some options that you can, for businesses, that you can also ask money for your Nextcloud apps. And of course, in the Nextcloud application, you have a nice app store built into Nextcloud itself, where people can then see all these apps and can also discover new apps where we show them. So we have documentation on our website, a ton of app developer tutorials. You can find them on nextcloud.com/developer. That's really the best place to start building Nextcloud apps or to find the APIs to integrate with Nextcloud. We have a developer newsletter as well, so you can stay up to date with what's happening around Nextcloud, get release announcements, information about events, but also application developer news. So yeah, you can stay tuned. So what I would say, check out nextcloud.com/developer and have a look. I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to build an app for Nextcloud? Do you want to start using it, of course? Do you want to connect your existing app to Nextcloud to store maybe the files on it or to store other data? It's all there. So that's the end for my presentation. If you have questions, you can come to our forums on help.nextcloud.com. You can ask questions there. And of course, talk to your teachers, other people involved with the project here at OS-SCi. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you, Jos, for your nice presentation. So we will now stop for 15 minutes and then we have the next masterclass. Thank you.